let's just sew whatever. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are cutting out the Phoebe bag from Sincerely Jen Patterns. I have decided to turn this into a sling bag, so I have made some modifications and I quilted these fabric pieces together, and then I am currently just using some leftover block pieces to cut out the side part of the front pocket. So this kind of gives the bag a little 3D effect, so make sure you're cutting that carefully. I had so much fun putting all these pieces together. You definitely want to make sure that you know how much fabric you're going to need before you get started putting your blocks together. So I kind of laid out the pattern pieces and guesstimated, and it worked out pretty well. I am using just a regular cotton woven for the lining. So right now I'm just cutting out the lining side of that pattern piece, and I don't think I ended up interfacing this. Those zipper tabs have a lot of bulk that's going to happen within the pattern, so it's best to just not add to it. So I'm just slowly cutting around, mirrored that pattern piece. And then clipping all four of those pieces together, setting it aside, and then figuring out my lining pieces go there, and then I have all of my exterior pieces here. So I'm reading like, okay, I need exterior, here we go. And I'm kind of deciding, do I want this to be on the fold? Do I want it to be lined up? Do I want it to be kind of like angled? This is the back panel of the bag, and I kind of wished I had added a slip pocket. I debated on using a Sharpie to trace it out and decided no, I'll just fold it, use my rotary cutter. So like I said, I wish I had added a slip pocket to the back of the bag. It would have been very helpful. I often wish I had a place to just kind of dump something in there that would be safe. I would guesstimate this is about 3/4 of a yard of fabric. So I'm just kind of pressing it flat. I am using just a quilting cotton with batting. And I do wish I had added some interfacing and then the batting just to add that little bit of structure, but it worked out okay. I would definitely make this bag again using some different materials. I think it would be fun because it was a very satisfying sew. I ended up adding an extra front zippered pocket, so I will show you how I add that, but keep in mind it does add quite a bit of bulk, so if you do not have an industrial machine, it may not work out well. So adding a slip pocket to the back, I would honestly have just cut a part of it off and cut extra lining pieces for both just to make it a big slip pocket. Anyway, so now I'm just reading what else do I need. I like to add tape to my pieces so I can cross off as I go. I've done this, I've done that. And then set it in the lining pile with all the other lining pieces. Do 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 do. Okay. Oh, I'm doing it to all of them. Okay, great. So some designers have like an official cut list. That's not, well, Jenny does have a little bit of a cut list, but it's not something you can like check off. It's just on the main pattern page essentially. So to conserve as much fabric as possible, I'm just going off the top of that piece I cut out of the back panel because it's a very similar curve. It does not meet up, but it's a very similar curve. So minimal waste here, which I was thankful for, especially since I worked so hard putting all those squares together. In the end of this video, I do explain how I sewed all of those pieces together. I am in no way a quilter, but I have dabbled, so I kind of get how to do it. But I mean, I'm not an expert, nor did I try to be. So I'm just going really slow around those curves, making sure to cut through all the layers. Don't judge how I rotary cut. I'm not watching you. And then another helpful thing would have been to mark out my centers. I don't know if I did that. Maybe I did. Look at me go. Of course I did. So I'm just making little tiny snips here. I don't want to go too crazy. And then I'm also setting some of those pieces on my heat press to press the wrinkles out. I felt like the longer I pressed them, the better they looked. So that was nice. All right, and moving on. Yeah, there's the additional cut list, which is super helpful. Okay, looks like that is the bottom gusset piece, and then we've got our top zipper panel. And since that's a rectangle, I just decided I'd rather use my ruler. I don't believe that the measurements are listed. Maybe they are. But they would be in that cut list, I think. If they're not listed, what I usually do is just measure the pattern piece and write that on the pattern piece so that I still have the paper pattern piece as a reference, but I don't have to worry about trying to cut it to size on a pattern piece. Okay, so I've got one side, I have two sides squared to the size of the ruler, no, the size of the piece I need to cut, and then I cut the other two sides so that it's a decently square rectangle. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. And then I like to give it a little press. You could interface it if you need to. But like I said, I don't feel like this needed any interfacing. So anytime I'm cutting and interfacing, I like to keep my pattern pieces in little piles of lining fabric, stabilizer, etc., and done. So I'm just reading over, what do I need? What have I cut? What do I not need? So I usually mark off first what I do not need to cut at all. I believe this is zipper panel, which gets attached to the front panel. This bag is finished with binding on one side. I believe you could do it completely without binding, but depending on your materials, you could be very sad when you were finished. Or close to being finished, I guess. I would honestly love to use the method of putting those pieces together to create like a quilted jacket or something. Maybe just use bigger blocks. Those are all the rage and they're so cool. I follow a lot of like thrifted sewists that turn old quilts into really fancy coats, stuff like that. Very inspiring and a lot of hard work. Doing voiceovers is really not my favorite thing. Why did I do this to myself? Hindsight, I probably should have ironed this or used my heat press on my exterior fabric. Not a big deal, but the amount of times I've like tried to de-wrinkle it, pretty funny. Okay, so this is the lower half of the bag. This is where I'm going to be making some changes. So I think I explained this in my simplistic sling video. Oh, no, you haven't seen that yet. So if you're adding a slip pocket, you need to add fabric. Like, that's probably not the best way to describe it. I'm adding a zipper, so I don't need to add any extra fabric or seam allowance to this piece that I'm basically dissecting, because I'm making up for it with the width of the zipper. But if you're adding a slip pocket, you're not adding anything to it, you're taking away with your seam allowance. So you need to add whatever your seam allowance is back to your pattern pieces if you're adding a slip pocket. I don't know if I started out with the idea of adding the zipper pocket or if it came to me later, but I am really thrilled that I added it. So I'm just setting it aside and I'm ironing it. I did cut my zipper tabs out of, I don't know if I did it with inner quilted. I think I cut my zipper tabs out of unquilted fabric because it would have just been too much within those seams otherwise. Okay, looks like we're not cutting that just yet, so I must have had the idea later. So I'm checking over my additional cut list. Is there anything else I need out of my exterior? Contemplating my existence. What is life? What is the meaning of everything? What do I want each piece to be? Here's what I already have. Oh, there it is. I was like, what about a zipper pocket here? Because, I mean, it's just such a big real estate that it just made sense. I'm going to cut it there. Yeah, right there. So I can put stuff in it. Set that aside. Yep, so that's my lower gusset. I was debating on adding slip pockets to the side, but it is not wide enough, so I wasn't going to do it. So, gusset and zipper panel. There's my top and back. Like I said, I wish, should I add a slip pocket? Should I not? Would it be nice? It would have been nice. You should have done it. So now I decided I do want to add the sling section from the Duncan messenger bag. So I'm looking for that pattern. I have these IKEA bins that I keep all my patterns in, and it's not very well organized, so it took me a hot minute to find it. Lately, I've just been throwing everything in the top drawer, so I was like, is it here? No? I thought maybe I put it in the drawer of patterns I really don't like that much, but I didn't. I didn't hate it that much. The Duncan is a really fun bag, but it's a lot of steps. So I'm just looking for that elongated triangle piece. Yep. Or maybe it's more like a cone shape. I don't even know. But I'm going to cut that on the fold somewhere. But I wanted to use up the least amount possible. I did quilted on one side and then just solid fabric on the other. And I wish I had either rounded off the top or kind of tapered the top. I think I mentioned that in my sewing video, sewing portion. Again, I didn't want to take up too much fabric. I think that was the winner. The Vanguard bus is coming and everybody's jumping. And if you like to party, come on and move your body. So because I want to make sure I'm not over cutting my fabric, I kind of undercut it in some areas. So I just used my scissors to snip it away. And then I have that piece. So cute. That I will need to cut my lining out of. So it's just kind of eyeballing, does it look okay? Do I like that? And that's a little scrap that I'll toss. Then I'm just trimming away what really is unusable and folding up the rest of it. Might make another thing eventually. Okay. What are we doing now? What are you doing, Lauren? What's your plan here? So what I'm confused by is I just put all of the lining pieces I needed back in that stack. Like, what were you thinking? Oh, okay. I'm kind of reading over what... Yeah, you didn't cut it. So what were you thinking? Zipper tabs? What are you cutting? What are you doing? Oh, strap connectors. That's right. For the either side of the bag. I think they needed to be 1.5 by 3. So when I get to my machine, I just ended up like cutting that in half. I don't know if I interfaced it or not. Am I interfacing those? I guess I did. Yep, okay, I did. I wish I hadn't then interfaced the zipper tabs, because they were a lot. 'Cause 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 they w But definitely interface your connectors. That's always good. I think if anything, maybe I should have just interfaced the exterior and not the lining. Oh my god, I would die if I did that. No, I didn't. Okay. So I'm just using up scraps of interfacing for these pieces. I hate to throw away anything bigger than like 3x2 because you could use those for something. But I don't blame you if you're one of those people that keep every single piece, because interfacing and materials are expensive. So if you have the time and mental energy to fuse those onto something else, whether it be a lining piece that you're never going to notice or stabilization for a bag, I support you. I see you. I support you. You are a beautiful tropical fish full of jelly beans. Don't ask why. Don't forget to stay hydrated. Yep. So fusing those pieces together. There we go. And just cleaning up any excess. And then I'm adding double-sided tape now, because I know when I get to my machine I'll be folding this in half. So just saving myself some time at the sewing machine. Putting my tabs back together. These should be 2 sets of mirrored tabs. Just FYI. So I'm putting them in order as such so I don't get confused later. And that piece is going to go in my lining pile. All right, now we're going to cut this. Those are my thinking fingers. Gross. All right. So I don't know why I didn't cut from the bottom. That would have made a lot of sense. Maybe I do. Nope, I don't think I do. What did I do? 3 inches? Oh, that was really vigorous. Anywhere from 2 to 3.5 inches. So now I'm figuring out how big do I need my zipper? How big do I need my zipper tabs? And I think based on my sewing video, I think my tabs were too short. I ended up cutting it and making new. So just cut your zipper tabs longer, probably 3 inches by 1.25. And then just trim down your tabs in the end. I think I did a 9-inch zipper initially and ended up having to cut it down to 8. I wonder if I still have that Post-it note. And then for your lining on this piece, I would say cut it about 1/2 inch shorter than the exterior, so that your seam allowance at that bottom isn't so bulky. So I'm clipping those together just to remember they go together. So that's where I like to write down what else I need to cut and then keep it with my pattern for future use. But I do really like the addition of that slip pocket, zippered pocket. A place to put things, if you will. Also, are those not the spookiest slippers you've ever seen? Okay, so I did use quilted fabric for the tabs. It is a little thick. But it gave it a nice shape. I don't know. It's so hard to know what the right interfacing is going to be. You can really only use your gut. Yeah, that's too small of a zipper tab. You gotta count for those seam allowances, girl. Girl, what is you doing? So finishing out cutting those zipper tabs that may eventually even be cut off. Who knows? Who knows? You'll know. I should know. I made it. But here we are. Weeks later. Hi, Ben. Oh, get off the video. Just organizing those pattern pieces, getting rid of ones I don't need, and crossing off what I have cut. Ben. Now we're going to work on cutting out some lining pieces. I did cut out the crossbody strap from this fabric instead of using like webbing or something. I really like the way it looks and feels. Really quick, I was cutting out the zipper pocket pieces for the lining. Just figured I'd start there. I did interface all of my cotton pieces with Sew Fuse, which is just a regular cotton woven interfacing. So similar to SF-101, just a teeny tiny bit sturdier. And I believe it's cheaper. And then I think that's my back zipper tab. No. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but they're way too short. So this is my grab handle. I ended up cutting this to, I believe, 11 inches tall, 3 inches wide. And I'm going to interface that too. I did not want the grab handle to extend across the entire panel because I didn't want to cover up my quilted pieces. So just going down that exterior cut list, figuring out what else I need, and prepping my lining. I don't know why I didn't have a bin for all of this, but I think I put it in a bin soon. Putting it in a bin is the safest way to know that you're not going to cut through your pieces. I am just saying. So I clipped this piece together because I knew I was going to be following that exterior piece to sew it anyway, so it did not need to be perfect and exact. It would be fine. And then that's gonna need to go in my to be interfaced pile. And then I think I debated on if I wanted to add like foam to it. But I think the batting was enough. There it is. Get that bin, girl. Where you been, Ben? Oh, hi, Ben. This is the lining for the front pocket, the smaller front section of the bag. And then there's the lining of that pocket. So the lining of that pocket is just a little bit bigger. And this is where I ended up adding a slip pocket that actually goes on the lining of the bag. But I think this pocket would have been really nice with like a cargo slip pocket in it as well. Because just that one pocket is little. One pocket, please. One little pocket. But that would add quite a bit of bulk. So I'm making sure to mark out my centers before we move on. And I only need one of that piece. So once I have that one cut, I just clipped it. Oh wait, no, that's my back panel. Sorry. So that's my lining back. Because you can see that little strap connector guide, which I did not do. And now I'm deciding how big I want to make my zipper pocket overlay piece. I ended up cutting that out of vinyl, so I'm just making a note here. I think it was 8 inches. 8 or 9. This is why I should just talk while I'm doing it. But I was in such like a creative flow state that I just couldn't, But I needed to film it. Now I'm punishing future me. This is the slip pocket. It's cute. It's little. Oh no, that's my zipper pocket. Yeah, so I'm cutting out 2 of those. That is the zipper pocket lining. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. Too fast. Can't count it. I realize I could pause it. But you can pause it too if you want. If you need to know. It's a free video. I'm not going to hand you all of the information. Jeez. That's the slip pocket. Which just gets folded in half and then top stitched around. But you could even do like where you fold the long raw edges in and then add some vinyl over top. Just Ben, get out of here. Yep. Boop. Is it big enough for a phone? Yep. Okay, great. Okay, what is next? So that is the front lining piece. Yeah. The magenta pearl fabric looks so good with that teal. It is one of my favorite combos. So if you have not tried our Luxe vinyls, you're missing out. Just saying. So I just rough cut that from a scrap. If you didn't know this, the underside of my table is just full of scraps. That's why her hair's so big. It's full of scraps. So the way I like to do a zipper overlay is I will measure in 3/4 of an inch along all sides of a 2-inch rectangle, however long you need it to be. So I usually just mark out the short ends and then I will rotary cut the long ends and make sure to not cut into past the lines. I usually try to undercut it as much as possible and then just use a pair of scissors to trim up to the line and then across the line, using as few strokes of the scissors as possible. So it's a nice smooth cut. And then if you need to, you can use a lighter to remove any fuzzies and fraying, and then use a clear edge coat or even edge coat that piece. I have never gone that far, but man, I wish I could. And then I was just admiring it, how freaking good that looks. Set that in the stack. I always want to keep these as zipper pulls and I just never do. So I'm like, here, I'm gonna do it. Boop. Nope, it'll just die. It's like leftovers. You really want to eat it, but you know you're not gonna. No. So I'm just continuing on cutting out the lining. So one of those lining pieces has just a squared flat bottom, and then one of them is a little more rounded. Next piece. So the cotton woven that I carry is actually, the supplier calls it a canvas. So it's much thicker than like the quilting cottons you would get at Joann's. Feels like more like the more expensive quilting cottons. So it's one of my favorites to work with. So I don't feel like it really needed the interfacing, but it did give nice structure and a little bit of loftiness to it that I really enjoyed. And then I was just reading, like, how many of these do I need? Pretty sure it's just one. And you'll see how the gusset lines are given. So that's nice. And then a really good trick is just to make sure that you're trimming your corners. And then I needed to do the gusset lining pieces. I think it would have been fun if I'd used a different color for that, but it is kind of nice to have all just one solid color in the lining since it's got so much going on. Is that all the lining fabric I needed? Dang. So I always like to fold up those pieces as nice as I can get them so that they're not so messy on my shelf. That pile of stuff on the table is like new stuff that I need to sew with. I finally cleaned it off my table, so who knows if I'll ever make something with it, but it was just sitting there mocking me. I was like, I'll use you when I want to use you. And not a moment sooner, okay? Just stop. Alright, so now we're going to start fusing all the pieces together to interfacing. I'm using, like I mentioned earlier, just a nice weight sew fuse cotton interfacing. Is it cotton or is it woven? I think they call it woven interfacing. I don't know if it's actually cotton or not. So go ahead and speed this part up. It's pretty mundane, just fusing. A lot of people will do something what's called block fusing, where they will interface large portions of the fabric they're cutting out anyway, knowing there will likely be pieces of interfacing you never really use. But I mean, at least it got to live attached to something, you know? But I could see how that saves time versus cutting out your pattern piece and then cutting out your interfacing. I think many moons ago, I used to cut out my interfacing first and then fuse it and then cut it. And it's like, I mean, really the only thing that would save time is fusing and then cutting, but I don't know. I just can't bring myself to do it too often, especially with large chunks of fabric. I feel like if you're doing like an exterior fabric where you know you only need X amount, you'd be fine. I was looking for that pattern piece. So again, I wish I had just like tapered off that shape. And then I'm just making sure again that I have all the pattern pieces I need. This is that zipper pocket lining that I wish, maybe even if I just hadn't interfaced it as much, because that front section really has a lot of bulk. That is my slip pocket, so now that I've interfaced it, I'm just clipping it so I know what the piece is. I like to cut several pieces to interface and press at once, and then I can let the heat press go and do some other pieces, and then before it starts to beep at me, I can lift it up. It seems to save me a lot of time. Alright, so now I'm just organizing all of my pieces into little pods of how it needs to be sewn when I get to my sewing machine. So I've got that and that and doot and doot. I already recorded this part of the voiceover, but I never hit start. So If I have less energy this time, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so mad. But yes, so I always find it helpful to set it inside the bin in a way that it will be sewn. So then I'm going to finish interfacing the last portion. I don't know if I've already talked about block fusing in this part or not. Maybe I did, but maybe I didn't. Anyway, block fusing can save you a ton of time. Ask how you can save 15% or more on car insurance. Does anybody watch Dessert Person with Claire Saffitz? I love her so much. I got to watch her talk live in St. Louis, and that was really fun. So usually when I'm interfacing like this, I will cut out a piece, fuse it, start cutting out another piece just to save time. I do have a video all about a heat press. If you're debating on a heat press, a steam press is also a good option. I know a lot of people have found them cheap on Facebook Marketplace. And you don't have to put water in it that creates the steam. So I'm just organizing those pieces, trimming any excess interfacing. And then I cut this as just one big chunk of fabric to save time. So I'm cutting the zipper panel, and then I'll cut the bottom of my gusset. Do you need a Kleenex, sir? Are you good? Bless you, Ben. There's that little piece. So we're almost done with the cutting portion, and then I'll go into explaining how I quilted all of my exterior blocks. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Oh yeah, that's right. So this is my little grab handle. So what I did was I folded under 1/2 inch, and what I wish I had done, but I didn't, so I want you to do it if you're doing something like this, is when you fold in, trim at like a 45-degree angle along that side corner so that there's less bulk that overlaps. So there's a little part that's like, yeah, you can see it lifting up. Trim that off. Like, you don't need to tape it down. Trim it off. It's going to prevent bulk in your seam and just look nicer. Another alternative would have been to fold it in half with the edges raw and sew it down and then flip it and top stitch. That's an interesting technique I've seen, but I don't feel like it always looks the best for me. So it is what it is. Okay, so I sewed 3.5 inch wide strips of the fabrics, just 2 together at a time. So it was a total of 6 pieces. So then I cut those at 3.5 inches wide to make these little rectangles. And then I separated them into stacks that matched so that it wouldn't be such a mess. So that when I take them to my sewing machine, I can just put 2 together. And I tried to pull from different piles and alternate the colors as best as I could. I then am going to cut them apart and press them open. And these are my little quilt blocks. They're not perfect. My seams are probably not to quilter standards, but it worked. And then I laid those out to see what kind of setup I would want. And then somehow I messed it up because I wanted colors that didn't touch, but then somehow I had colors that touched. And I was like, wait, how did this happen? Because when I picked them up, like, I clipped them together in order, so I don't know. So I would just sew a long block and then sew that to another long block, as you can see here, making sure to line up your center seams. And then I pressed all of that open and ironed it nice and crisp to put it on top of some quilt batting. I then took that to my machine after spray basting and just went corner to corner. I only added the one angle of quilting. I didn't want to go too crazy. I did use a Tex 70 industrial thread, which might have been a bit much, but it added this like old-fashioned worn scrunch that I really liked. So that is pretty much the end of this video. I hope you try quilting some fabrics together. It's so fun and relaxing, and then make a bag out of it, you know. But this was the finished product. I love it. I hope you will join me in sewing this bag, and I will see you all later. Bye.